Thank you. The first thing I'd like to say is this. I was in Iraq in 2003. I was in a place called Diwaniyah and a place called Al-Hilla. It's the old Babylon area. When I was there, I drove around in Humvees that were soft skin. They didn't have doors. We drove around with impunity for the most part because IEDs hadn't been invented yet by the enemy. I came back in 2004 for my second tour as a United States Marine, and I was in Fallujah. And I remember in Kuwait, prior to crossing that line of departure going into Iraq, we actually went to a giant pile of sheet metal and had to weld on steel onto our Humvees. We got Kevlar blankets from the Army, and we laid that in our Humvees so we could sit on it in case we had an IED or some mine go off. We had to do that because we were ill-prepared, because we had gutted the military in the 90s. We were not prepared for this war, not even close to being prepared for this war. The military got gutted in the 90s. Therefore, I had to, on my second tour, weld on steel plates that were laying in a big pile that had been shipped over from the U.S., weld them onto my tour. Was in 2007 in Afghanistan. I drove around in MRAPs. I flew around on Ospreys, the Marine Corps V-22. I saw all the new weapon systems. I used Predator drones to target and strike the enemy where they were. It was a huge improvement. We have come leaps and bounds in the last decade with what our men and women in the military need. And it's a travesty that we started this war where we started it because of the Clinton administration gutting the military over the 90s. If we want to have a conversation with the American people, if we want to gut the military now, if we want to cut $1 trillion over 10 years, if we want to do that now, then we need to tell the American people this. If there's a problem in China, in the South China Sea, and we're in the Luzon Strait, and we have to face them down over Taiwan, then we're not going to be able to respond if there's an incursion by Iran and Israel. We're not going to be able to do it. We're going to have to make those choices. I don't think the American people understand, and they need to, what these defense cuts mean. They mean that we were going to make those choices. We're going to say we're not going to be in the South China Sea. We're only going to be in the Arabian Gulf and the Mediterranean. We aren't going to be able to take on Iran if they invade Israel or they hit Israel with nukes because we're involved too much with China right now or in another sector of the world. Terrorism isn't going away, folks. It's going to be here forever. Therefore, we need to stay vigilant. Is it expensive to maintain the military that we have today to be able to respond to a conventional threat like China or North Korea? Yeah, it's expensive. And it's extremely expensive to have to be able to have that conventional force and still be able to respond to terrorism throughout the world in all of the different myriad of ways that the terrorists are networked together now. They are not centralized. They're decentralized. We have to hit them wherever they are, and they are everywhere, including here in the U.S. If we cut defense spending at the drastic levels that we're talking about, those are the real choices that we're going to have to make. We're going to have to say we're not going to fight terrorism. We got to be prepped for these big conventional wars that could someday happen. Or we're going to be prepared for these big conventional wars that could someday happen, and we're not going to fight terrorism. Those are decisions that I don't think the American people want to choose between. The number one role of this president as commander-in-chief, the number one role constitutionally described for this Congress is to protect this nation. And if these defense cuts go through, Congress and the administration will be abdicating their number one responsibility, which is to keep the American people safe, and we can't let that happen. Thank you.